Alright, welcome back to section 5.1. What's going to happen next is we're going to be given tables like this. So we have years and population of Nevada, and they went ahead and they found an equation for this already. So our equation is P equals f of t is 0.078t plus 0.84. And then well, how did they find that? Of course, we've done this many times now. They type these numbers into L1, those numbers in for L2, use the calculator. Part A says, find an equation for the inverse. Alright, so I wrote down my equation. Now, this time, I'm not going to switch the variables, and I'll show you why in just a second. It'll make more sense if we don't switch the variables. So, what I want to do is I want to find the inverse, which means I want to get t all by itself. So, P minus 0.84 equals 0.078t, and then I divide, so t equals p minus 0.84 divided by 0.078. Okay, so I'm going to write this as f inverse of p, and you can see I've kind of switched my letters here. Up here we had f of t. Here I'm going to have f inverse of p. And the reason I'm doing this is it makes more sense. Going through a lot of lead here. Because remember what this did. Here, your input was time, years since 1985, and your output was population. When we do the inverse, our inputs and our outputs are going to switch. So here our inverse will be population. So that's why it makes more sense to leave this as the letter P. Our inverse will be population, our input will be population, our output will be time. Alright, so that'll make more sense here in just a second when we do some problems. Part B says find f at 3. Well, f at 3 would be 0.078 times 3 plus 0.84. And I grab my trusty calculator. 0.078 times 3 plus 0.84. That would be 1.074. And what would that mean? Well, in this case, this means I plugged in year 3. So we started in 1985. So in 1988, Nevada's pop was 1.074 million. In part C, they asked us to find f inverse of 3. So I take 3 and I plug it into there. I get 3 minus 0.84 divided by 0.078. I grab my calculator. 3 minus 0.84 divided by 0.078. I get 27, let's call it 28. 27.69 is what I got. I'm going to call it 28. So what does this mean? Well, when we're dealing with the inverse, that means we're plugging in population. So this says population will be 3 million in 1985 plus 28 years. That's the year 2013. Alright, so that's why it made a lot more sense to me to leave this as f inverse of p. Because when I plug in a number, I'm plugging in a population number. If I called that f inverse of t, if I switched the letters like we normally do, I think that would be confusing. Alright, finally part D, it asks, what's the slope of f inverse? Well, I'm going to rewrite f inverse a little bit here. F inverse of p is p minus 0.84 divided by 0.078. I'm going to rewrite that as p divided by 0.078 minus 0.84 over 0.00 over 0, wow, 0.078. So I'm going to think of this as 1 over 0.078. That's 12.82p minus 0.84 divided by 0.078, 10.77. So my slope would be right there, 12.82. Now, what does that mean? Well, in this case, what does it mean? Let's see. What are our inputs and our outputs here? Remember, we're dealing with F inverse of P equals T. So our X is our population, and our time is our Y's. So this is years divided by population. So it tells me that it takes 12.8 years for my population to increase by 1, and of course 1 in this case stands for 1 million. Alright, homework problem number 3 for you. I want you to go to page 227 of your book and do number 49. I just did number 50. So there's homework problem number 3. Homework problem number 3. There it is. Page 227, number 49. Alright, and then the last thing that you're going to see in this section. Graphing. I'm going to give you a graph. This graph that I've drawn, this first one, this is the graph of some function f of x. I don't know what the equation is. Turns out it's really not important. What I want you to do is I want you to graph the inverse. And here's all you have to do. Remember what inverse does. I'm going to draw my inverse in red. Inverse interchanges x's with y's. So, since my original function has the point negative 10, negative 6, the inverse is going to have negative 6, negative 10. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I just switch the x's with the y's. Since my original function has negative 4, 0, my inverse is going to have 0, negative 4. And I continue. 0, 1, I switch it, that becomes 1, 0. And finally 5, 9 becomes 9, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right there. And I play a game of connect the dots. Now here's what should happen if you've done it correctly. If you were to draw the line y equals x, which is the 45-degree line that goes right through the origin, you should get a mirror image. So if you could think of cutting the paper along this line and folding it over, they should match up perfectly. It doesn't look like they do here, and the reason is I don't think my boxes are the same distance. I think my distance here on my x-axis is longer than my distance on my y-axis. That's why they don't quite match up. Alright, sorry I got interrupted there. A student showed up. So I think I finished off by saying these should be symmetric. Don't quite look it because my scaling is not equal. Alright, so here's your last homework problem, homework number 4. This is our function g of x, and I want you to draw g inverse of x. Leaving it up there for a few seconds so you can copy it down. I'll turn it off. I guess you can always rewind the video and pause it if you need to.